All right, so get this. Today we're going deep on synthetic telepathy. Ready to question everything you thought you knew about the mind?
Sounds intense.
It is. Our only source is this audio chapter calling itself Basic Tactics of Synthetic Telepathy, Chapt 2.mp3. It's basically like a guide for people who think they're targets of this whole phenomenon.
Wild, right?
Definitely a unique approach. The speaker, Vidar, he doesn't even try to convince you if it's real or not. Jumps right into survival tactics, like assuming you're already on board and need help.
No kidding, talk about diving in head first. He kicks things off by mentioning holographic attachment. And yeah, it's as crazy as it sounds. Think like holograms beamed down from satellites.
Like some supercharged GPS or Wi-Fi?
Exactly, but instead of maps, it's beaming. Thoughts, maybe even like ghostly figures.
Yeah, that's how he describes them. Semi-tangible, meaning they have some sort of physical presence. He even says they can appear as human forms or orbs, which is where things get really out there.
Wait, so everyone would just see like a glowing orb floating around. That's where it gets even weirder. Vidar says only certain people can actually perceive these holograms. He uses the term oversop, which I guess means people who are like extra sensitive or maybe psychic.
So only those already kind of tuned into this stuff would even notice, if it's even possible, I mean.
That's the big question, right? If only a select few can perceive it, how can you even study or verify it? Like trying to prove a color exists that only some people can see.
Okay, so holograms. Okay, but how? What are these frequencies even doing to our brains? Is he talking about, like, manipulating brain waves?
That's what it sounds like, and here's where the claims get really unsettling. He suggests that through these layered frequencies, they can control bodily functions like dopamine, endorphins, blood sugar, even the moisture levels in your body.
Seriously. He's saying they can mess with your blood sugar remotely. That sounds insanely dangerous, not to mention far-fetched.
Yeah, he even uses the example of inducing a diabetic coma, saying they could make it look natural.
Whether that's even possible, who knows? But it does make you think about the potential for harm if this stuff were real. Okay, so let's say, just for a second, this isn't all science fiction. How could they even target individuals with that level of precision? Are they, like, constantly monitoring everyone?
Good question. Unfortunately, he's pretty light on technical details. He focuses more on the effects and how to supposedly counteract them.
So more about fear and paranoia than actual explanations.
It's hard to say for sure, but the focus on survival tactics definitely creates that feeling of urgency, anxiety.
Well, speaking of anxiety, this next part is where things get really unsettling. Vidar says they can manipulate how people around the target see them, especially family members.
That's like it can influence relationships, maybe even create conflict and isolation. He even says they can adapt to the diets and medications of those around the target, too. Makes it even harder to separate reality from manipulation.
So you can be totally fine, but your loved ones start thinking you're acting strange, maybe even dangerous. That's just messed up.
Definitely raises questions about the ethics of it all and the impact it could have on relationships.
It's like something out of a psychological thriller. But he doesn't stop there. Vidar brings up even more extreme claims, like remote neural murder.
That's a chilling phrase for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely raises some eyebrows.
He's suggesting they can use EMF frequencies, things like microwaves, sonar, subsonar, to actually cause harm, even death, from a distance. Isn't that, like, scientifically impossible? I've heard about the potential dangers of EMFs, but wouldn't you need a ridiculous amount of energy to actually kill someone with sound waves?
You would think so. But this idea of weaponized sound isn't totally new. We know certain frequencies can have effects on the body, like how ultrasound is used in medical imaging, or how infrasound can create that feeling of unease.
Right, but those are controlled situations, not like long-range assassination tools. It still feels like a huge leap in logic.
I agree. It's important to be skeptical about these claims. But even if we ignore the more outlandish parts, the underlying theme of technological manipulation is still pretty unsettling.
For sure. And I think that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating, honestly kind of terrifying. It makes you consider the possibility that technology could be used in ways we never imagined, ways that could completely change reality as we know it.
Absolutely. As we keep going with Vidar's claims, it becomes less about technology and more about manipulation, control, about losing trust in a world where it's harder and harder to tell what's real.
So where do we go from here? What else is Vidar going to throw at us on this journey into the world of synthetic telepathy?
Well, he goes on to describe this really strange concept. He calls it left-to-right brain surgery.
Brain surgery. Hold on, I thought this was all about remote manipulation. Is he saying they can perform surgery with sound waves, too? This is getting ridiculous.
Not exactly, not like traditional surgery. He describes it more as creating a delay between the hemispheres of the brain.
A delay? What does that even mean?
Imagine your brain is like a two-lane highway, right? Information flowing back and forth between the left and right hemispheres. This surgery, as he calls it, supposedly creates a traffic jam on one side, messing with that flow of information.
Okay, I'm picturing it, but why? Why mess with someone's brain hemispheres?
That's where things get even weirder. Vidar says this delay can actually change how someone perceives time and even create a space for covert communication.
Covert communication, like subliminal messages. Or is he saying they can literally plant thoughts in your head?
It's not entirely clear. He's vague on the specifics, but it sounds like they're exploiting this messed up brain activity to influence the target's thoughts and actions.
Okay, so we've got holograms, luminal coatings, manipulating bodily functions, messed up relationships, remote murder, and now brain hemisphere delays. It's like he threw every conspiracy theory into a blender.
It's definitely a lot to process. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's look at some of the tactics Vidar outlines for dealing with all of this. If we're going down this rabbit hole, we need to understand how he thinks people can cope with this constant threat and paranoia.
Yeah, good point. As crazy as this all sounds, if there are people who genuinely believe this stuff, we need to understand their perspective, how they're trying to navigate this world.
Exactly. So let's take a closer look at what he suggests. Starting with something he calls identity shifting. So with this identity shifting, they make the target think specific people are behind it all, like adding confusion and paranoia on top of everything else.
So instead of some, like, faceless tech overlords, they make you think it's your neighbor, coworker, your own family even. That's messed up. But wouldn't people figure it out eventually, like realize it's not actually those people?
I think that's the point. The real people behind it stay hidden. And they use that misdirection to isolate the target, make them doubt everyone around them.
It makes you wonder, if this technology is all about control, why even bother with those games? Wouldn't it be easier to just, be upfront about it?
Maybe. But Vidar seems to think they enjoy the psychological aspect. He even talks about something called egomatizing, where they use the target's ego, their hopes and positivity, to try and start a dialogue.
So they play on your vulnerabilities. That just sounds like classic manipulation to me, not some futuristic mind control.
That's a good point. A lot of what he describes could be interpreted as psychological warfare, not necessarily evidence of some advanced tech.
Right.
But then he brings up these synthetic telepathy orbs, and that's when things get really strange.
The orbs. Yeah, what about those?
He describes them as physically rotating around a person's body, manipulating their nervous system, even causing physical pain.
Hold on, physical orbs. But before, we were talking about holograms. How can something be both a hologram and a physical object?
Yeah, that's a question he doesn't really answer. It's like he's mixing technology with paranormal stuff, which makes it hard to tell what's real and what's not.
It's making me think this whole thing is less about actual technology and more about exploiting people's fear of the unknown. Think about it. If you already believe in psychic abilities and stuff, wouldn't the idea of mind-controlling orbs seem more believable?
That's an interesting take. It's possible he's using those beliefs and anxieties to his advantage, using familiar imagery to make those fears even stronger. But even if we say the orbs aren't real, the themes of manipulation and control are still there.
True, true. And I guess that's what's so disturbing about it all. It plays on our anxieties about technology and privacy in the real world.
For sure.
But then it goes a step further with this whole subconscious memory reversal thing.
Yeah, that one's wild. He's saying they can access and change your memories, bringing up voices and experiences from your past and using them against you.
Like implanting false memories?
Mm.
Or twisting real ones?
It's hard to say for sure. He's kind of vague on how it actually works. But he does mention music as a tool they can use. Calls it musicmatizing. The idea that music can trigger certain memories and emotions.
So like weaponized nostalgia. That's weirdly specific, but I guess music can be really powerful that way. I know there are songs that instantly take me back to high school.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so sneaky. They're using things that make us human, our memories, emotions, our connection to the past.
It's like they're hijacking your own personal soundtrack. Pretty messed up.
And it doesn't stop there. He goes on to describe broadcast gaming, which is just as unsettling as it sounds.
Broadcast gaming, what is that?
Imagine feeling like you're constantly being watched and judged, like you're on stage but you don't know who the audience is.
Okay, now that is creepy. Like Truman Show, but even worse.
Pretty much. He says they use this to make the target feel even more isolated and vulnerable, like they're always being watched, always being evaluated.
It's funny, even without all this crazy technology, social media already makes you feel like that sometimes, like you're living in a fishbowl.
Yeah, totally. This whole broadcast gaming thing just plays into that existing anxiety.
It really does.
And in a way, that's what makes this whole synthetic telepathy thing so scary. It takes our real-world fears and anxieties and twists them into something truly terrifying.
It does.
And throughout it all, Vidar's telling his listeners, or I guess targets, to be vigilant, stay aware, don't fall into their traps. It's almost like he's trying to create a sense of community among those who believe.
It makes sense if you buy into the whole thing, right? Band together against a common enemy. But it also makes you wonder, is he genuinely trying to help people who feel targeted? Or is it a way to control them even further?
That's the question, isn't it? It's hard to say for sure what his real intentions are, but it's clear that his message resonates with some people, people who feel like they're being targeted, manipulated, controlled by forces they don't understand.
It's a scary thought, even if it's just paranoia. And speaking of scary, Vidar doesn't just focus on the negative. He actually gives advice on how to fight back against these effects. So what's the secret weapon against all this? Does he tell people to build a tinfoil hat or something?
Not exactly. He does mention shielding from EMFs, but Vidar's main focus is like mental strength. He talks about grounding techniques, mindfulness practices, things like that.
Interesting. You'd think if you really believed someone was beaming holograms into your brain, you'd be all about blocking those signals, right?
Right. But I think he's acknowledging that the real battle is in your mind. If you can stay grounded and not give in to the fear and paranoia, then you're less likely to fall for those manipulation tactics.
So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
Mm.
If you believe you're being targeted, you're more vulnerable to it.
It's definitely something to think about. And that's what I find so interesting about this whole deep dive. It blurs the lines between technology, psychology, and belief. Even if we say the crazy stuff isn't real, it makes you think about how our minds can be manipulated, whether it's through high-tech stuff or just basic psychology.
Yeah, it's a little freaky. But honestly, a lot of what Vidar's describing just sounds like classic paranoia. Attributing every negative thought or experience to some outside force, that's a dangerous way to think.
It is. And it's important to remember that just because you feel something doesn't mean it's true.
Right.
There could be other explanations, mental health stuff, stress, even just bad luck.
So where does that leave us? We went down this rabbit hole of synthetic telepathy. But who knows if any of it is real? What are we supposed to take away from all this?
I think the biggest takeaway is the power of belief. Whether you buy into the whole synthetic telepathy thing or not, the fact that people are feeling these anxieties and fears, that's real. And that in itself is worth thinking about.
So it's less about the technology and more about the human element, the way our minds deal with fear and uncertainty.
Exactly. And maybe that's the scariest part of it all. It shows how vulnerable we are to manipulation, how easily we can buy into belief systems that offer simple answers to complicated problems.
That's deep. So what do we do with that knowledge? If just the idea of this technology can cause so much fear and paranoia, how do we protect ourselves from that manipulation, whether it's coming from some secret organization or just our own heads?
That's the question we all need to be asking. Maybe Vidar's right about mental resilience, about thinking critically, about not just believing everything you hear.
It's a good reminder that our minds are powerful tools, and learning how to use them is the best defense against any kind of manipulation, whether it's coming from the outside world or from inside ourselves.
So as you keep exploring this topic, stay open-minded, but don't be afraid to question things. Do your research, and always try to see things from different perspectives.
And maybe take Vidar's advice with a grain of salt. A little paranoia can be a good thing, but too much can lead you down a dark path. Stay curious, fellow deep divers, but stay grounded. Until next time.